Hello, welcome everybody to our session, the title of which you can see right here on the slide. I hope you can all see it, that it's about enhancing volunteer motivation and engagement in the case of the Ukrainian Red Cross Society. So I will be speaking in English, and so will my colleague. We will introduce ourselves shortly. And first, probably the general rules for this entire event, which are the same as everywhere in the long night of research. So please, if you haven't done it yet, update your name on Zoom, the full name and organization. Please keep your microphone mute throughout the presentation, unless we actually ask for your participation. Give your video on if you can, but if that's a problem, you can switch it off. For the questions, ideally you can use the chat. Basically, there are two of us, so while one of us is speaking, the other one can probably answer the questions in the chat. And yeah, if you have the questions of a technical IT nature, yeah, please also ask it in the chat. And we have Margarita with us, who might probably help with that. This one is automatically recorded, and you will get the access to the recording. So please, no need to take pictures of screen or of other participants. We generally disallow that. So thank you for your understanding. Yeah, and the next one, yeah, yes, just yeah. About the AI-generated captions, you'll receive this text in the chat that you can turn it on. We'll be speaking in English, but if you don't understand that, here is basically, you see, 3 steps how you can turn the captions on and change and select your own language. And the instructions in other languages are in the chat already published now by Margarita. Yeah, now let us introduce ourselves. So I'm Alexey Cherednichenko. I'm the head of the Volunteering and Youth Development Unit in the Ukrainian Red Cross Society headquarters. And my colleague I'll let him introduce himself.
Right, so thank you. I'm Gabriel Pictet, and I work in Geneva at the IFRC in the National Society Development Department.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. Okay, so let's move on to the session properly. Yeah, so we have 3 questions as a kind of to guide our session throughout. So we don't ask you to answer them right away, but we will return to them towards the end of our session, so that if you listen to what we're saying with these 3 in mind, it might be a more interesting experience for you. So the first one is, since we're going to talk about the well-being, like how do you generally decide which interventions to implement to enhance the psychological well-being of volunteers in a crisis? And we're talking about protracted crisis, like specifically in Ukraine, you know, the war, which is, well, the full-scale war has been ongoing since 2022, and the lower intensity one since 2014. Yeah, so a lot protracted crisis. So which interventions might help the volunteers in that one? Yeah, the second is about the volunteers and staff in Ukraine specifically score highly on the motivation, like both volunteers and staff, and engagement, other parameters alike. But in other national societies, by contrast, the staff usually have lesser scores than the volunteers, yeah, on these. And so why do you think Ukraine is different? And the third one, what questions on volunteer motivation would you like to research in your national society or branch? Well, research, that doesn't necessarily mean the research as a scientific research, but more on that later. Okay, so these are the questions, and now I'll hand over to Gabriel for him to explain the methodology.
So thank you. The Motiro approach is based on self-determination theory. And since this is a research seminar, we thought it'd be interesting to give you a briefing on the self-determination theory. And first, I would like to say that a theory is not theoretical. It's something that's incredibly practical, that allows you to predict things, that allows you to explain things. So here, this is a theory-based approach. Self-determination is a theory in psychology that is widely known and practiced. In fact, it's probably the most popular explanation of human motivation that we have up to now. And so we chose self-determination theory because we felt it was particularly interesting for the Red Cross and Red Crescent, where motivation is often very emotional. When we work for the Red Cross or Crescent, we do it out of compassion, and compassion is an emotion. And therefore, we were looking for a theory that really explains what drives people to do something. And we know that we're driven by emotion. We're not driven by reason. We're driven by emotion. And then we justify what we've done after the fact by some kind of reasoning. But usually, the reasoning comes after the emotion. And so what self-determination theory does, it explains what we would call motivational outcomes. So a motivational outcome is how you feel at a given time. So you can feel satisfied, and I'm here, motivational outcomes. You can feel satisfied, you can be engaged, you want to do things with other people, and so you ask questions and you try to improve whatever's happening. You identify with the other team members. The team members have meaning for you. You are close to the people you work with. You want to continue doing what you're doing. That's another motivational outcome. You feel kinship. You share the same values as the people you work with or volunteer with, and probably most importantly, you feel good. You feel good, as in you feel energetic. You feel good about what you're doing. So this is what we call mental well-being. If you're depressed, if you're sad, you're not doing good. Well, that's low motivation. Now, self-determination theory states that these motivational outcomes are generated when three needs are met. These are three universal basic psychological needs that everybody has, except maybe a few psychopaths. And even then, they probably have them too. And these are the need to feel autonomous or empowered, the need to belong to the group, to relate to what the group is doing. And the third need is the need to feel competent. That is to be confident that whatever it is that you need to do, you will be able to do it, either because you have the skills or also because you know that you have a capacity to learn and therefore to succeed. So these three needs, if these three needs are satisfied, then you will be fulfilled, you will be engaged, you will want to continue. And this is true for staff, and it's true for volunteers. It's true for men, it's true for women, it's true for children, it's true for seniors. It's true for everybody. This is really universal. Now, there have been studies in self-determination theory all over the world for the last 30 years, and they all say these same things. So we're not making this up. This is science-based. Now, another part of self-determination theory looks at leadership and management, because there's some types of management, some types of leadership that actually are better at satisfying these three basic needs. And so, for example, if a team leader really supports and encourages the autonomy of the people in his or her team, then it is more likely that the members of the team will feel autonomous, they will feel that they belong, and they will feel competent. In the same way that if you're in a team where people encourage each other, where they support each other, then people will feel more competent, they will feel a greater sense of belonging, and actually they will also feel more autonomous because they know they have the support of the others, and therefore they can take more risks, they can do much more. And recognition is also important. So if everybody in the team feels that they are appreciated by the leader, the managers, the organization, and the other team members for their efforts, then again, they will feel more competent, they will feel a stronger sense of belonging, they will feel more autonomous, and therefore they will be more satisfied, more engaged, et cetera, et cetera. So this is self-determination theory. It has been tested and tried for decades in a whole bunch of different settings, and it works really well. And the reason why I'm insisting on this is you will see later on that we have correlations. Correlations, that means that when one variable goes up, another variable goes up, or when one variable goes up, another variable goes down. So the correlations does not mean causality. It just means that, one thing goes up, the other thing goes down. But when you have a very good theory like self-determination theory, you can actually say that there's a good chance that's not just a correlation, it's also causality. And so here the arrows show you the causality, right? So good leadership, good management leads to the satisfaction of the three needs, which then in turn leads to these positive motivational outcomes. So I think I will stop here. But keep this in mind because you will need to remember this when you answer the questions and when you look at the data.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So basically, how we're working with the self-determination theories, we're using the Motiro platform, the digital tool based on the self-determination theory, which allows us to calculate these the parameters pertaining to the three components of self-determination theory. And how do we particularly do this in Ukraine? How did we do it? So, well, first we of course contacted, did all that preliminary preparatory work, in terms of agreed with Gabriel and with the software developers how we're going to use it, translated the interface, the front end and back end into Ukrainian and everything. Then when the substantial implementation phase came, like you can see here on the table, so we formed our working team, which implemented the research. Then the Motiro team, we formed the teams. That means that basically all our branches, and we have just under 200 local branches, 25 regional branches. So all the volunteers, all the staff, like in total, it was just about 2,000 people answered the survey. And the survey based on the self-determination theory, and then we could see the results, just how they scored. And sorry, I'll add a few words on the journey first. So basically, they answered the survey. Then we have the workshop when we explain to them what the self-determination theory is to the people who are going to guide the process on the ground. So once we conducted all the surveys in all the branches, we analyzed the results and we prepared the team discussions, which is an indispensable second part of the process, because we don't just want the raw data, but we want the interpretations, and interpretations are born in the course of the team discussions. So basically, the people who are somewhat versed in self-determination theory and the use of the Motiro platform, they discuss the results with the teams from which they came in the first place. For those people who had taken part in the survey. And try to understand just why the results of the survey are this and not that. So what probably can be done to improve the results in the future. So that's those discussions. They're all proceeded in all the branches, documented. And then, as you see, in the course of the following workshops, the results are compared between the branches. The solutions are suggested by the teams themselves, like what can be done to improve the results, to improve their motivation and engagement. And it all ends up, you see, it's not even over because the final workshop is going to take place towards the end of this month. We'll discuss the correlations at the national level, the pathways, and we'll show a bit of that later on to you. Now I guess we can show the data. So basically, these are the results of the surveys. Here you can see just which parameters are taken into account in the survey. Things like well-being, like engagement. You can see here if, I hope you can make it out. You can read the particular formulations of the questions in the survey. And well, the maximum here is 5. Yeah, so it's scaled from 1 to 5. Generally, 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. So it's over 4 here. So you can see that basically the well-being and engagement, despite the fact of this protracted crisis, the long war, it's still probably higher than we ourselves expected. Yeah, maybe the next one. And this is the core of the self-determination theory. Yeah, the 3 basic needs, just as Gabriel has already explained. Yeah, autonomy, belongingness, and competence. And the answers to these specific questions listed here actually feed into the results here. So you can see this bar graphs. Yeah, they show then percentage of people who basically answered with the 5, no, which scored their own or autonomy in a specific question as 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1, and you can see that the vast majority are 5s and 4s here. Yeah, and also apart from this core self-determination theory parameters, we're also trying to measure things like leadership and management. In terms of questions like, say, leadership, my supervisor listens to how I would like to do things. I feel understood by my supervisor. My supervisor encourages me to ask questions. Yeah, so things like listening, understanding, and encouragement. And also the management, like external motivation drivers. Yeah, leadership is more about internal motivation in terms of self-determination theory, and management is external motivation, how the organization offers opportunities for us to learn, network, earn incentives, personal recognitions, and so on. So you see that basically this platform it already contains all these tools for these descriptive statistics, which you see here. So they're all generated by the platform itself, and it already contains the standard survey. So basically, all you have to do to get the results on your particular national society or a particular branch within the national society, for example, is just to run the survey, and these will be generated automatically. Yeah, the solutions. This is of course the most interesting part. Yeah, because like I said, this is basically probably the main thing, the main result of this entire Motiro process, because this is the result of interpretation of the data. Like you see, this is the table which consists of 3 columns. The first is the relevant Motiro parameter. So this is not the entire table, just to showcase a sample. The relevant Motiro parameter out of those which you just saw on the previous slide. The second one is the specific problem identified. Yeah, so how does it translate into lay terms? What does it mean at the level of the specific branch, specific team? Yeah, so why do we have a problem with belonging? Yeah, because the volunteers do not feel that their team is a united group. Yeah, why do we have a problem with values? Because the volunteers don't feel that they have the shared values, that they share them with the rest of the group, of the team, and so on. And the third one is solutions suggested by the teams themselves. So basically, the teams of the people who participated in the survey in the first place, they try to identify in the course of the discussion facilitated by our people versed in the self-determination theory, they try to identify what the problem is and to suggest a possible remedy. So this, you see, like for belonging, how could the volunteers feel that their team is more united? They could have thematic meetings for volunteers, like joint trips, excursions, could take into account everyone's opinion. Yeah, so these solutions are mostly based on what's already being implemented in some branches, or not already being implemented, but they all, for example, had an idea to do that, or they probably know that their colleagues in the other branches do that already. So basically, you can see that these might be tailored to the specific needs of our branches of Ukrainian Red Cross Society. Of course, tailored to our own context. Like, for example, you can see here the bottom right, the reference to the Danish Red Cross Youth Sprint methodology. That's because it is now being actively implemented in Ukrainian Red Cross specifically. Yeah, so it's basically a good thing which enables volunteers to take more responsibility and implement their own small social initiatives, for example. So these are the interesting kinds of solutions which we might provide. For competence, we know that the IFRC learning platform provides lots of courses, and we now are launching our own e-learning platform in the Ukrainian Red Cross Society, and of course we're also providing some offline training courses as well. And the also important insight here is that you see, even if any given training lies outside the volunteer sphere of activity, the access to new skills and knowledge is often a good motivational factor in and of itself. Actually, that's what the experience shows. That the volunteers are motivated by the opportunity to learn something new. The mentorship system, which we're now working to establish it, that's also an important thing. The screenings of motivational films and short animated films, we have some of those, like the ones on the fundamental principles of the international movement with subsequent discussion. That's a great thing in order to renew the commitment of the volunteers to our fundamental principles and basically remind them of their meaning and everything. So yeah, this is about the solutions, I would say. Now I'll probably over to Gabriel to discuss what we can do with the data itself apart from working on the solutions.
Right, thank you. So now we're moving to actual research. What Alexei presented to you was what you get when you use the Motiro app and you follow the process that he described. Now, what Alexei did is he described a major operation in Ukraine that went nationwide, where we had over 2,000 volunteers that answered the survey, and probably over 600 staff who also answered the survey. So it's a big endeavor, and that's why it took a whole year. You might choose to do it just in one branch or in one team, and obviously it will be not as spectacular, but just as instructive. So all that you get when you do a Moti survey, you get it automatically, the graphs. What you don't get automatically is the conversation that you have with the teams. So after you do your survey, you talk to the teams and you discuss the results of the team's survey results. And so that way the interpretation actually comes from the teams, not from some researcher on the other side of the planet, but from the actual people. And up to now, our experience is that this data actually resonates with people. They can see themselves, they understand why they score high on this and why they score low on that. So this means that the solutions that they provide, which are framed by self-determination theory, tend to be very appropriate, and they're very appropriate for them because they're the ones who identify them. So that's for the Motiro, that's your standard approach. But what happens is you get all this data, you get all this wonderful data. So you can do research. So you'd call it secondary data analysis or whatever, but you can ask now more fundamental questions. One way of doing that is to run correlations. And this heat map here is a heat map of correlations. So for those of you who forgot your high school statistics, I'll just give you a very quick explanation of what a correlation is. So a correlation is when you have two variables. When one increases, the other increases also. That's a positive correlation. When you have one variable that increases and the other decreases, that's a negative correlation. Simple enough. Now, you can measure the strength of a correlation with something called a correlation coefficient. And a correlation coefficient is between -1 and +1. In between -1 and +1, you have 0. So when you have a correlation coefficient between two variables of 0, that means the two variables are not correlated. That means that maybe one goes up, but the other goes neither up or down. So that's when you have no correlation. If you have a correlation that's a correlation coefficient that's between, say, 0.5 up to 1, that's a strong correlation. That means that something's happening. And then if you have a correlation coefficient of -0.5, that's a negative correlation, that's strong. So we're talking about correlations. But now, as I told you at the beginning, when you're working on a theory that has been tested, and you have causalities, a theory explains on how a cause A causes effect B or effect A or whatever, right? So here we can say that because this is the whole questionnaire is based on self-determination theory, it is probable that if you see a strong correlation, there might be a causal relationship between the two variables. So let me give you some examples. Here you have autonomy. So in this column are what we call motivational factors, right? So if you remember the infographic I showed you, if the three needs are met, autonomy, belonging, and competence, we said that as a result, motivational outcomes should be higher. The motivational outcomes are in the columns. So sharing my ideas, the team has meaning, I'm satisfied, I want to stay longer, a volunteer, I share the same values, and I'm energetic, I feel well. These are motivational outcomes. And so you see that when a volunteer feels autonomous, or rather, the more volunteers feel autonomous, the more they are satisfied. So there is a causality, a correlation, but probably also a causality between autonomy increasing and satisfaction increasing. In the same way, here we see that satisfaction is also positively correlated with the sense of belonging, competence, but also proper management, the leadership skills of the supervisor, and returns and recognition. Basically, you see that most factors affect satisfaction, except for one. And so it's this row here, which we called front. And so we grouped volunteers into two categories, those that worked very near the front lines and those that were far from the front lines. And so here we see that there's no correlation between any motivational outcome and the fact of being near the front or far from the front. So this is something that we might want to discuss. But being close to a crisis, whether it's an earthquake with lots of wounded people, or next to the front lines, or even being bombed, does not necessarily affect your motivation more than other things. So I'm not saying it's not affecting them, I'm just saying that it's probably not affecting them more than other things. And these are the things are what? The leadership skills, the management, the feelings of autonomy, belonging, and competence. So this is a first research result that we have found in the Ukraine data. If people have questions, please ask them. I might not necessarily interrupt myself, but don't hesitate. If this is not clear, don't hesitate to ask. Now, another way of looking at these correlations is through this graph that you see on the right panel. And we call this the pathways graph. And so you see, you have, I hope you see, but you have different nodes here. Here you have what we call the management nodes. So, the returns being, benefiting from the different advantages that the Ukrainian Red Cross offers to the volunteers. The rewards, like being fairly recognized for the effort, for the work, and the status that people derive from being a Red Cross volunteer in Ukraine. So it's what you have here. And it's good leadership and management is represented here. And then after this, you have what we call leadership. And these are three leadership skills that we know from self-determination theory is very effective in enhancing motivational outcomes among volunteers and staff. And these are, to be encouraging. So an encouraging leader encourages participation, to have a leader that demonstrates understanding, compassion, and empathy, but also who listens and who really shows that they're listening. So active listeners, if you will. So, and then here you have the three needs: competence, belonging, and autonomy. Here you have the mental health indicators, so feeling strong and vigorous, feeling emotionally drained, or feeling frustrated. And then here, these are the other motivational outcomes: being satisfied, wanting to stay, sharing the same values, etc. So motivation, engagement here. In blue, you have correlations, positive correlations that are strong, that are more greater than 0.6. So these are very strong correlations. So for example, if when volunteers feel that they're getting good returns from being a volunteer, so these returns would be the possibility of networking or learning new skills, for example, well, then their sense of belonging actually increases. In the same way, if their sense of belonging increases, they will be more satisfied, and they will feel closer to the team in the sense that they will share the same values, or that the team and their work has more meaning from them. So this is the effect of belonging. And we've seen this in other national societies, not least the Swiss Red Cross, that in the Red Cross in general, the feeling of belonging or relatedness is very powerful. And we sort of know why, because we're motivated by compassion and wanting to do good. So it sort of makes sense that this sense of belonging to an organization that has, values that we can identify with is a strong motivator for volunteers and staff alike. Now, in red, you have negative correlations. So remember, a negative correlation is when one thing goes down, the other thing goes up, or vice versa. So for example, the less people feel rewarded by their when they do their volunteering activity, the less they feel rewarded, the more frustrated they are. The less they feel understood by their leader, the more frustrated they are. The less they feel that they belong to their team, the more frustrated they are. The less autonomous they feel, the more frustrated they are. And the more frustrated they are, the less satisfied they are with their volunteering activity. The more frustrated they are, the less they want to stay. So it sounds trivial, right? It sounds obvious, but this is the actual data from Ukraine. And if you look at the pathways of other national societies, it's slightly different. It always makes sense, but some relationships are stronger than others. So this is for Ukraine. But if you think about your own motivation, and how you feel right now, you might relate to this. If you feel that you're not autonomous enough, that you're being micromanaged, you're probably more likely to be frustrated and to feel emotionally drained and you might want to leave, but you're not leaving because you want the job. So that's how we go from a correlation, a statistical correlation, to an explanation based on self-determination theory, causality.
Yeah, let's now discuss the questions. So if you have any questions on what you heard in the course of the preceding slides, please ask them now, because from now on we'll be asking the questions of you. The first one, so basically, like I said, these are the same, just as at the beginning, just to remind you of them. So the first one is, how do you decide which interventions to implement to enhance the psychological well-being of volunteers in a protracted crisis, and which interventions might those be precisely? The second one is that the volunteers and staff alike score highly on the motivation, engagement, and other parameters. But in other national societies, the staff usually have significantly lesser score than the volunteers. And now you might already understand that when we say score, that we mean precisely the score obtained via the Motiro platform. Why do you think the staff generally scores lower, and why is Ukraine different? So let's now concentrate on these two, and specifically on the first one. So please, you can write your answers in the chat. You can take a minute to reflect and then write it in the chat. Or even if you wish, we've been told that you have access to your microphones, so you can just switch them on and speak up if that's more comfortable with you. So we hope on your participation now. The first one, yeah, how do you decide about the interventions, and which interventions might those be? Specifically about the psychological well-being here, yeah.
As people think, I can give a little hint
Yes.
of what not to look at. And so for that, I will move back to this slide. So the first thing that would come to mind is that in Ukraine, there's a war. There's a front line that's been, that's moving somewhat, but that's pretty, I mean, it's not moving by kilometers and kilometers. And so you might be saying, okay, for a psychosocial intervention, the logical place to go would be on the front line. That's the logical thing. And Alexei, maybe you can tell us, is that what you guys thought? Because if I look at the correlations here, I can see statistically that volunteers on the front are not anymore, emotionally drained, frustrated, or weak energetically than the others. So the question is, what do I do? Well, one thing not to do is to concentrate all your efforts on the front lines, because one, you'll be taking risks, because it's always more difficult to go near the front lines, with a bunch of psychosocial support. But on top of that, it's not necessarily where the needs are the greatest. It seems that it's geography is not a factor that can predict problems in psychological well-being in Ukraine. And so another way of answering Alexei's question, which is here, how do you decide which interventions to implement to enhance the psychological well-being of volunteers and protract which interventions might those be? Well, one answer is it's not geography. The intervention should not focus in one place necessarily. And so think of that. Why is that? And that might give you a clue on what kind of interventions you would need to implement to enhance the psychological well-being of volunteers. I hope I confused you more.
Yeah, and if we even go a step further and do the literature review, so see what the people before us have already written on those issues, the scholars, the scientists, and basically we will even reveal that there are already recent studies which state that the volunteers which are constantly under such conditions as Ukrainian ones, they eventually become more resilient, and they become able to cope with stress better, So they sometimes they're under higher stress, but they already have better coping mechanisms. So like Gabriel said, the correlation between being closer to the front line and being more stressed, it might just not be there. Okay, any questions, any answers on your side? We can't see anything in the chat. Okay, if not, then maybe I'll suggest what we came up with on this one. Yeah, so basically you see the same table because one of those parameters of the same solution table which I already showed you is the well-being, and the problem which we identified is emotional exhaustion and burnout. So the same tool we might which we already used to find the solutions for the other issues might also be relevant here. One of the advantages of the Motiro journey is an opportunity to just ask the teams themselves, by conducting those kinds of team discussions with the survey participants, and to ask them which interventions they would see as useful for support of the well-being in their particular branch, or because it also allows us, the tool allows us to focus on a particular level, whether we're talking about the local branch, the regional branch, or the national society in whole, and to obtain the necessary data, the necessary statistics. And yeah, we're able to also look at the results of the individual team discussions and then try to generalize and extrapolate. And just here in the slide, you can see some of the solutions suggested by our teams specifically, with probably an important caveat that sometimes the facilitators of those discussions included the people rather close to psychological support activities. Yeah, so they might have included something from their own arsenal of tools. Yeah, but so I won't read it out for you. I guess you can do it yourself. Of course, these are the things which are tailored to Ukrainian context, suggested by Ukrainian teams, not necessarily just as applicable for your national societies if, God forbid, they're in the same situation, but maybe just maybe worth looking into. Okay. Yeah, the second question, yeah, maybe let's move a bit back, just to remind what the second question is. Yeah, that the Ukraine volunteers and staff score highly on the motivation, engagement, and other parameters, but in other national societies, the staff have lesser score than the volunteers. And why do you think that is? Generally, and what's the difference in Ukraine, in your opinion? So if you have any thoughts on that, you can, like I said, either write in the chat or speak up, turn the mic on. No,
Yeah, well, as you're thinking, I can give you some insights as people are thinking. So we did Motiro surveys in over 20 countries, actually now 40 countries, because there was a big operation in all of Asia Pacific. And systematically, practically everywhere, we saw that the psychological well-being and most motivational outcomes were much higher for volunteers than they were for staff. And we don't find that in Ukraine as much. So this is sort of surprising for a number of reasons. First, the first reason is, why would Ukraine be different? There's no reason why Ukrainians should be any different, or maybe they are. I don't know. You can sort of try to answer the question. But more importantly, what happens usually is when a volunteer is dissatisfied or frustrated, they just leave. Whereas when a staff is dissatisfied or frustrated, it's more difficult to leave because it's a job. So it's income, job security, et cetera, status. And being on the job market is always a little complicated and stressful. So staff tend to stay in their organization longer, even if they're burnt out. In fact, that's why you have high staff burnout, including in the Red Cross. You would not expect to have high volunteer burnout, because volunteers usually, if they're burning out, they just stop volunteering. Not always, but enough so that it makes a statistical difference between staff and volunteers. And yet, despite the fact that Ukraine's a complicated country to live in right now, we don't find this difference. So that's something that we would like to discuss. So if you have any ideas, speak your mind now.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move that to that answer slide then. Yeah, like the general situation has already been explained by very reasonably well. Yeah, that basically there's little that prevents volunteers working free of charge from leaving if they do not feel that their needs are satisfied. So maybe those dissatisfied have already left the organization and just didn't take part in the survey. Yeah, and also the volunteers usually have a more direct contact with beneficiaries and subsequently are able to directly provide assistance. And then they see firsthand the positive reaction to what they're doing, the results of their work. And that's often the most meaningful part of the volunteer activities and positively influences their well-being. Okay, in Ukraine, however, there's also this thing that, of course, both volunteers and staff are under extremely complicated circumstances, and so are the beneficiaries, of course. So they're all united by this sense of common meaning, common suffering, if you wish, common goal, and that basically this school of resilience, as we sometimes call it, that's what's happening, especially closer to the front lines, but generally everywhere in Ukrainian Red Cross Society. That's something which is often an overarching factor which trumps the other considerations and basically bonds the volunteers and the staff together, because the other considerations such as status, recognitions, etc., often fade into the background and are not seen as just as meaningful against this overarching trumping one. Okay, and the last one is what questions on volunteer motivation would you like to research in your national society or branch? Yeah, and I guess I'll hand over the conclusion to Gabriel.
Yeah, so the question is not a rhetorical question, because we have a whole team. So Alexei, myself, but also Karine and Salam, Ekaterini from Cyprus, and a few others who have done Motiro journeys, and they would be happy to support you if you want to do a piece of research on volunteer motivation in your branch, in your national society, or just within your own team. So think about it. You can enhance the motivation of volunteers, but you can also learn something about your own country or your own branch or national society. So this is an offer. It's free of charge. And we will conclude with that. So you can go and look at motiro.com. So you can, this is the platform. It's a website. You can go, you register, and you can launch your surveys by yourself. You don't need us. It's free of charge if you're with the Red Cross, which I suppose is your case. But if you need help, you can ask us. You can answer a lot of questions by using Google Scholar or ChatGPT or whatever, because a lot of the answers, when you get some funny statistical results, a lot of these answers you can actually find in the review literature. So you can ask your favorite AI, and you might get some insights without having to do complicated research. Now, we will have a Zoom webinar that's organized by the Europe and Central Asia office. And so you can join us. And I think we'll put the link is in our community of practice. So if you go on communities.ifrc.org, you will see that there's a community of practice that's 100% dedicated to Motiro. It's called Volunteer Engagement, Motivation, and Retention. It's all Motiro. You will find there a lot of resources, a lot of explanations. You will find us there, and you will be able to continue the conversation, ask your questions, and get support on that community of practice. So I think that's it. If you have any more questions, you have 2 more minutes.
And there's the last slide for the feedback form.
Yes, the feedback form. Yes. So
Yes.
please give us your feedback. Show us that you're alive and well, and that you're actually with us. So please do that now, so that the organizers are happy. Give us 5 stars. That would help us too. But most importantly, join us on the community of practice to continue the conversation. And Alexei, do you want to?
No, thank you very much for being here with us and for letting us talk, because it's really an important and, to me personally, an inspiring thing to be a part of. And like Gabriel said, you can be your own researchers, so please take it away, join us, and we promise that we'll try to make it as good for you as possible.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.